Thank you all for coming. This is really an historic event in the political history of the city of Albany and this 3rd Judicial District. Today we have Mayor Sheehan and other very notable elected officials, as well as many of the delegates who are judicial nominating convention delegates who will have pledged their support to the Honorable Margaret Walsh, who is running for Supreme Court Judge. I am here to welcome you. I am here to introduce our newest mayor of the city of Albany, who has become a very dear friend and very accomplished mayor in her first, 9 months of service. And it's accomplished a tremendous amount. It's historic that we're here today because this sitting mayor is going to be endorsing an alternate slate of delegates to the judicial nominating convention. So without further ado, I'd like to thank you, Nancy, for this gathering.
Thank you. It's really an honor to be here with a number of other fellow elected officials and former elected officials in what is really an historic really gathering and show of support here in the city of Albany. You know, I just finished reading a book about Dan O'Connell. It was written in 1973, published in 1973. And there is really no difference between what I was reading in that book about how the machine selected judges and what happened here in the city of Albany and in this county when it came time to fill the seat of long-serving Judge Teresi. And when that seat opened, when I learned that Judge Teresi was retiring, I thought, great, it's time to get some more diversity on the bench. We've had such positive movement of late in getting the city of Albany and the county of Albany and this area to better reflect the people that we represent. And so I was truly excited by the opportunity to bring some changes and some diversity to the bench. And I was really, I will say, shocked to learn that the decision had already been made. The decision had been made by party leadership as to exactly who would fill that seat. And what was even more appalling to me was what happened afterwards. As the media got a hold of it, as they started to ask questions about how the successor to Judge Teresi was going to be selected, and there was a lot of talk about the lack of diversity on the bench. As the Times-Union reported, only 2 of the 19 people elected to the Supreme Court this century have been women. All 7 of the current trial bench judges are white men. No blacks or Hispanics or Asians or gays ever. And in response to that, the party chair, Matt Klein, said, and this is in the New York Law Journal, he said he was hard-pressed to identify a minority lawyer on track for Supreme Court. He said there are talented minority lawyers in Albany, but many of them are working in state government or doing other work that does not result in essential Supreme Court trial experience. Shocking. There are not that many black or Hispanic trial attorneys who actively engage in litigation, and that is the pool or reservoir from which you draw candidates. That was his quote. Historically, the people who were nominated had trial experience and they had political affiliations. Klein said that in his mind, diversity doesn't trump qualifications. He said a young black or Hispanic attorney in Albany who aspires to the Supreme Court should get in with an established litigation firm, practice for a good 15 years, and become politically active. 1973. That's all I have to say. What has happened between then and now? And when you think about the candidate that we are supporting here today, who already is a judge, for the party chair to not recognize that somebody who has been doing the job is qualified for the position is shocking. And so what did the party chair do in response to pressure? He did hold interviews. He did assemble a group of people to interview candidates. And that group that was convened was all white and all male, and they proceeded to choose exactly the candidate that Matt Klein had already pre-selected. And that was supposed to be that. That was how we were all supposed to just move along and say, that's the way that the party works, there's nothing that we can do. And the presumption there of that old cast of characters that would be elected and that would follow in the tradition of Uncle Dan O'Connell is not what happened here. It was not going to be a coronation. Instead, 29 ordinary citizens, some of them elected officials, some community leaders, and some just regular people tired of the same old game, banded together and decided that enough is enough. They were tired of being told who their next judge would be. They rallied behind the candidacy of a different candidate, and not just any placeholder they could find. No, this group decided to back the most qualified candidate, Albany County Family Court Judge Margaret Walsh, an experienced and well-respected judge who has actually performed the job of Supreme Court Justice for half a decade. So these individuals, the Walsh delegates, decided to run themselves as judicial delegates and take the power out of the hands of Chairman Klein. Together, their supporters garnered thousands of petition signatures. They have withstood the misguided but unsuccessful legal challenge of Chairman Klein, and they've secured a place on the September 9th primary ballot. And we need There are too many here to name, but I want to point out some of the delegates, like Richard Conti, President Pro Tem of the Common Council. He's a committed public servant, and I'm so proud that he stepped forward to do this. But you just look at the diversity of the people who have come forward, elected officials, not just from the city of Albany, but from our surrounding towns and suburbs, to say, this is a new day in Albany. This is a change, and we are going to take back our party and bring democracy to Albany County. And with that, I'm going to give it back to me.
All right. Thank you so much, Kathy. How about another round of applause? So now it's my pleasure to introduce a man who absolutely needs no introduction, former Assembly member Jack Hageman.
Thank you. Well, it's an honor to be here today. And I look back, everybody expects me to say something historic. And by the way, I knew Dan O'Connell and I was at his house, so I know whence we come. But 23 years ago, I took on, with the help of neighborhood groups and volunteers, some of the people here, a challenge to the Democratic Majority Leader, 18-year incumbent, who was the Majority Leader of the county legislature. That election wound up as a tie. That tie was broken by the committeemen. And the results were that I had to do a write-in. The odds on doing a write-in when your name is nowhere on the ballot and you're not allowed to have any poll watchers are not great. I won that write-in. Over 3,000 people voted in it. And they voted not because I didn't have the greatest volunteers, and I had a lot of them in the hundreds, or because I was the greatest candidate. They voted because there were some charges, quite valid, that things were not being done honestly. They were being done in a backyard or a back room. The votes were disappearing. I could give you all, this one I really should write up. And what the people saw was not an individual, a politician, who was disappointed because they didn't get what they wanted. They realized their vote was compromised. Their sacred vote was taken away from them. The way we select Supreme Court judges in the state of New York is a disgrace. It's an anachronism. Last year, a family court judge tried to break that system, and Judge Dugan's approach was to go directly to the delegates. And there was a strong appeal to the delegates. And what happened? The delegates, who were hand-selected, rubber-stamped the choice. That wasn't the way to do it. So what Peggy Walsh has done with her followers is she's taken a different approach. She's going straight to the people. She's going to the Democrats who vote in the primary and saying, look, it's going to be complicated, but these are the individuals that are, well, they say you can't fight City Hall. I think we don't have to fight City Hall anymore. And my next job is to introduce our next speaker to see that we don't have to fight the Village Hall either. Mayor Jim Gaunt.
Type of thing. There's a number of people involved, and I'm very excited to be proud of it. If we're successful, and I hope we are, we will have a great judge on the bench. If we are successful, and I hope we are, we will have made the point that diversity is very important. If we are successful, and I hope that we are, we will show that rank and file voters can make the difference, and that's the most important point, I think.
Take up too much time from everybody, but for those who don't know, I was one of the attorneys who assisted in the litigation to put the delegates back on the ballot after Matt Klein and Rachel Valetti at the Board of Elections improperly removed them in the first place. We had to litigate this issue. Matt Klein and his old Albany Party friends Jack Cunningham, Richard Jacobson fought this tooth and nail at the administrative level. They fought this in the Supreme Court, where we won. They then appealed it to the appellate division, where 4 judges unanimously affirmed that decision, telling Matt Klein that he was wrong, that his actions were an abuse of his office, and that he had finally gone too far. Not to be undertaken, he went even further and tried to appeal this case to the Court of Appeals, which, in its good wisdom, declined to take the appeal, allowing our delegates back on the ballot. Essentially, what Mr. Klein and his party hacks tried to do is disenfranchise voters in this county, Democrats who wanted a real choice, next week. That, to me, is unconscionable. I'm happy to have helped in this. I'm happy and proud to be a delegate supporting Judge Walsh. I'll be even more happy Tuesday after the polls close, when this slate and all these delegates win, and we can go to this convention and finally tell him, his old Albany friends, enough is enough. So let's win this race.